Hey, welcome everybody. Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the Abridged Code of Jewish Law, Chapter 41. And we're up to Ches number 8. Paragraph 8, Sif Ches. So we're discussing the laws of making hamotzi for the meal. Mitzvah livtzoy ala pasach shuva yosim. So it's preferable, it's the best thing when we make hamotzi, and so we're breaking bread, so to speak. So we might have different types of bread, and on Shabbos we have 2 loaves. So we take the one which is better, the better one, the ashuva. Literally say the more important, but the one that has more significance. So we're going to give some examples. Therefore, if you have slices or pieces of bread, and then you have a whole bread, a whole loaf. And you're planning to eat both of them during the meal, right? And they're both the same type. Even if the small one, if the whole one is small, it's a little bread roll, and the other one you have is half a whole loaf. So the whole one is smaller. And perhaps it's not as literally clean, but no, it's not as white, not as processed, not as the piece. Nevertheless, we break the whole one. We make the blessing on the whole loaf and cut up and eat the whole loaf. Because it's more choshev. It's the choicest. It's a better way to do it. Now, this is presuming that all things are relatively equal. They don't have to be the exact same quality of flour, but similar. And, you're planning to eat both of them. You're only planning to eat, one slice. So you don't have to cut the whole one when you have slices already. But presuming all things are equal. However, im einem min echad, they're not the same type. The whole one is inferior. It's a much more inferior quality loaf than the piece, the one that's a piece. Going for example, the whole loaf is made from spelt. While the cut piece, is wheat. I feel hikatana, then even if the piece is smaller than the loaf, Mavarach al shel chitim, you make the bracha on the wheat. I mean, generally speaking, flour from wheat tastes, the bread tastes better than flour from spelt. That's why majority of loaves of bread today made with wheat. That's how it goes. Now, if the whole loaf is barley, it's bread made out of barley, even though it's inferior to wheat, nevertheless, since barley is mentioned explicitly in the pasuk that speaks about the species, the produce which Eretz Yisrael is blessed with, the gam hi then if it's the whole one, if the wheat loaf is cut, so there's pieces missing, or it's just a slice, or whatever it is, and the barley one is a whole loaf, the same therefore, someone is Yiras Shamayim, if they want to do the right thing, they should give honor to this barley one, which is whole. So what do you do? You take the cut piece, you put it underneath the whole loaf, and you make the bracha, and then you break off from both of them simultaneously. So that way, even though you're going to prefer to eat the wheat, but you're still taking some of the barley, and we're making the bracha on the barley as well. So that was if one was whole and one wasn't whole, a whole loaf. Im shteihem shleimus. Now, if they're both whole loaves, or they're both cut loaves, or min echod, and they're the same type, so there's no reason to favor one over the other. Yivarach al nekia yoisa. You make the bracha on the better quality flour. And if they're both equal in that, then Yavarach al yoisa gedola, whichever piece is larger, you make the bracha on the larger piece. So to sum it up, presuming the bread's the same, you make a bracha on a whole loaf if you're planning to eat the whole and the piece. Even if the whole loaf is smaller, even if it's not as high quality, but if the whole loaf is a inferior quality, inferior type of wheat. So, for example, it's spelt, then you can make the broch on the piece. But if it's barley, although that's inferior, but it's mentioned in the verse in the pasuk that speaks about the produce that Israel is blessed with, so you hold it together with the wheat flour piece of bread, make a broch on them together, and you pull a piece off both of them at the same time. And if they're both the same, either they're both whole, they're both cut, they're both the same type. So then the preference is use the higher quality one, and if they're even in the same quality, then you make a bracha on the bigger one. Okay, so chapter 42, Siman Membase, Tes, paragraph 9. Now, in Yeshafana Pas Yisrael Pas Nochri, you have bread baked by a Jew and bread baked by a non-Jew. Now here we don't mean literally baked by a non-Jew in his house, because we can't have that, even from a bakery. And this person is not so stringent about eating bread from a non-Jewish baker. If both of them are whole, or both of them are cut, the pieces, and also they're about the same size, and they're the same type, then Yavarach al Pas Yisrael should make the bracha on the bread that was baked by a Jew. Vim Zoi Shel Yisrael. Now, if the bread made from baked by the Jew, it's not as high quality, it's not as good as one baked by the non-Jewish baker. Then they become equal, and you can make the bracha on whichever one you prefer. Now, the im bal habayis nishe mipas nochri. Now, if the host is stringent not to eat bread made by a non-Jewish baker, he just bought it for the guest. Yesh the salkom in the shulchan al achaber. You should remove it from the table until after motzi, and because you don't want to get into the shaila of having better quality and less quality and different things. Okay, those who just joined us, chapter 42, number 10. Okay, now, all of these things that we said, all these rules that we just said about which loaf takes priority, is if you're planning to eat both. So you got a whole one, it might be a small bread roll, small bulka, and you have half a challah. So the half a challah is twice the size than the bulka. But since the roll is whole, you make the bracha on the whole one. But
Rabbi,
this is
you said chapter 42. It's chapter 41.
Yeah, 41. Sorry. Thank you. Yes. This is if you're planning to eat both of them. But if you're only going to eat one, right? It's just you. There's not guests. You're making one sandwich, maybe two sandwiches. I mean, how much bread can you eat already in one meal? You're only having from one. then Yisal Zoshi writes Lechol. Then these rules don't apply. You eat whichever one you want. You make the bracha whichever one you're planning to eat. Mashkichem Bezer al Hachshivas, and you don't have to be concerned about which one's more important or less important. You just take the one that you're planning to eat. So if you're planning to take the small one and make a sandwich out of that, then that's fine. Okay. Now chapter 42. Simon Mem Beis, and we're going to do the halachas of a suda, of the meal. Okay. So Aleph, number 1. If a person has animals or birds, that's his responsible to feed them. Right? You know, you might have a pet, I don't know, deer on your acreage, and it feeds itself. It grazes itself. Or you have a cow on the farm and it grazes itself. We're not talking about that. We're talking about an animal that it requires you to feed them. Then the Jew is forbidden to eat anything themselves until they have fed their animals first. Okay, again, this is presuming that they need to eat. You know, some animals only eat once a day. Various things, but whatever eating, if they need to eat around this time as well, you're not allowed to eat yourself. You can't take a meal until you have fed the animals. As it says, so how do we know this is true? It says in a verse, so when the Torah tells us the rewards when we do the mitzvahs, it says, I'll put grass in your fields for your animals, and then you'll eat and be satisfied. So what do we see from this pasuk? The Torah puts animals eating before the humans eat. So this is where we see that it's important for the person to feed his animals before he eats himself. So that's eating. That's sitting down for a meal. Or the shtia, but have a drink. Adam kaidim. Now the person takes priority. If you want to have a drink, you can give yourself a drink before you give your animal some water. The Chsiva says, ashke. It was just over a week ago in the Pasha, right? When Eliezer goes to get Rivka, so she says, "You drink, and also your camels I'll give to drink." And likewise it says, and you give drink. This is now when the Jews are in the wilderness, and Hashem's telling Moshe, you'll give drink to the Eidah, the congregation, to the people, and to the animals. So when it comes to eating a meal at least, not necessarily a small snack, but anything that's substantial, person has to feed the animals first. When it comes to having a drink, though, they can take a drink before they give drink to their animals. Okay, so I know some people joined us during that. So chapter 42, up to number 2. Yes, David.
I'm not sure, but I think that when Eliezer, before he got offered, before she said, drink and I'll draw for your camels also, I think that he said the camels, he was thinking in his mind, the camels first and then him.
He also said himself first.
Did he? Okay.
Yeah, he also said himself first. Okay, base number 2. A person shouldn't eat or drink in like a glutton. Okay, by all means, a person doesn't have to starve themselves. They don't have to, walk away from the table before they're satisfied. But the person doesn't have to overdo it. Also, a person shouldn't eat or drink while standing. And his table should be cleaned and it should be covered. Even if you're gonna eat something insignificant, in other words, a snack, even for a snack. You shouldn't take a piece larger than a kibbetza, right? Little means an egg, but most food would be bigger than an egg because it's the displacement, it's the volume of the egg. So if you have bread, it'd be a bigger piece. We shouldn't take a piece bigger than that and eat from that piece. Okay, obviously we cut pieces, but and a piece can be more than one bite, depending what it is, but you shouldn't take huge pieces. And you shouldn't hold the food in one hand and break off pieces with the other hand. And you shouldn't drink an entire cup of wine in one shot. And if a person does drink it in one shot, this is a glutton. This is also a glutton. We don't, it's this certain cultures, when it comes to alcoholic beverages, it's skull. They should drink it in one shot. And that's not the refined, the levels of refinement the Torah expects from us. Stay pomim, but if you drink it in two shots, again, obviously depends on the size of the cup, but at least two shots. Zehu derech eretz. This is regular, right? That's what was done regularly. Shalish pomim. But if you take it in three drinks, this is considered being haughty. So again, that was the social norm at the time. So someone, and they probably had smaller cups than we have today also. But if he has a very large cup, then Yochel will come up on him. Then you can take even many sips. Doesn't matter. And also a person has a little small cup, a little shot glass. He can also drink it in one shot. So it's all dependent on the facts on the ground. Okay. Number 3. Right, so a person, you shouldn't take a bite from a piece of bread or something like that, and then put it on the table, give it to someone else, or put it back in the serving dish. Right? Maybe this is going to be repulsive to the other people at the table. You take a piece of meat, take a bite out of it, and put it back on the serving plate. Right? This is it's repulsive. Nor should you drink from a cup and then give from someone else to drink. Okay, we do that kosher bracha when a cup that we made a blessing over because people have that. But in general, your regular drinking cup. Because majority of people don't want to drink. They're careful not to. They drink from a cup that someone else has drunk from and left some left. And so what happens if you give it to someone, they may be embarrassed and feel that they can't say no, and you're going to force them to have from against their will. So that's what we want to avoid. Dalit, number 4. Person shouldn't be captain. Okay, there's not an exact word in English. So while trying to see what word I should translate it, I looked in one of the English Kitzur and it said irritable, but it doesn't really mean that. It's more than that. It means someone who's I can see why irritable might be for lack of a better word, but every little thing bothers them.
It here says display anger.
Anger, but it's even nice when every little thing is like someone has to have every little thing exactly the way they want it, and they get annoyed when it's not exactly to the finest detail of what they want. That's what a captain. It's like we're talking about being makbid about something. Some people say it's the same word. People particular, they have to have this. Now, sometimes there's time and place for that, right? There's a halacha, and we have to ensure the halacha is fulfilled. But here we're talking about just at the meal in general. It's people getting upset because I wanted that piece of challah. And they're getting all annoyed because someone took the piece of challah they were looking at from across the table. Because if a person behaves like that, what's going to happen is the guests and the family members, they're not going to want to eat. They're going to be embarrassed to eat anything because they're worried they're going to annoy him or her. Right? As soon as they take something, it's going to get all because he'll be angry and irritable, and he begrudges them their food, essentially. So a person shouldn't do that. Right? So I don't know how much this belongs in the laws of a meal and how much belongs in social skills 101. I don't know, but that's just have that in mind. Okay. Hey, number 5. Person shouldn't speak while they're eating, even to say words of Torah. Now, obviously, you can speak during the course of the meal, but not while the person is actually eating. It's food in their mouth. Because it's dangerous. Because maybe it'll go down the windpipe instead of the food pipe, and they'll choke off a bit. Now, even if someone sneezes, you shouldn't say bless you. Gesundheit. You shouldn't say it to the person if you have food in your mouth. But when you're not actually eating, so at the moment there's not food in your mouth, mitzvah loim al devrei Torah. As a matter of fact, it's a mitzvah to say words of Torah at the table. So, and the more the merrier. And, again, within reason. Sometimes, there's such a thing as winning the battle and losing the war. Right? So sometimes if your meals are too heavy, I don't mean the food, but I mean the discussion content, then people tune out. You turn them off. But the right balance. But it's mitzvah to say something. At least some words of Torah. And a person should be very careful about this to try and make sure that they do say some words of Torah at a meal. Now there's a very nice custom, he says, that after eating the bread of a motzi, you say Mizmor LeDavid Hashem Roi Lo Echsor. Right, Psalm 23. Why should Torah become tefillah almost noiself? Because it's Torah. It's from Psalm. It's from Tanakh. So it's words of Torah, and it's also a prayer primarily for one's food, for their livelihood. So it's okay. I personally haven't seen it. I don't know one whose custom that is. That every time they make a motzi, as soon as they eat some bread, they say Mizmor LeDavid. Many people, especially on Shabbos, at the meals, have the custom to say Mizmor LeDavid before they start the meal. So the same. It's for the same ideas, but right after they had a motzi, I didn't see it. Evidently, at least some people are accustomed, or at least did. And after person eats, to finish the meal. So before they bench, though. So on a weekday, they should say Al Naharis Babel, right? By the rivers of Babylon, right? It's a psalm as an introduction to benching. The Shabbos, the Yom Tov, the Yom Shein, Omrim Mehem Tachnan. And on Shabbos and Yom Tov and all the other days that we don't say Tachnan, we don't say the repenting prayers. Omrim, we say Shira Malis V'Shuv Hashem. Shalom. So that's also partly for this reason. Shalom al Shulchan Matoich Sefer. Now, if a person he studies, if they learn from a book, from a sefer at the table during the meal, then sarach lashkichim oid, they have to be very careful. Because it was common. It's very common. I don't think it's common so common today. It was common with the old types of paper they used to have, that it would have little worms in the book. And if you bring it to the table, you can very easily get the worms into the food, and a person could come to transgress the prohibition of eating worms. Right, so that's you have to be careful of it. Not in this halacha, but in general, you also have to be careful not to get the svarim ruined or dirty from the food, and particularly Pesach. Right, you're gonna have to really Pesach clean. If svarim come to the table, they have to really be clean properly for Pesach. Yes, David.
With Al Naharos Babel, I always
Yes.
felt a little weird. Like if I have guests that I have to explain to them, what's this pasuk about? What's this verse about? Happy is he who smashes the heads of the infants against the rocks. And somebody starts asking me, like, what's that all about? I'm going to be like, let somebody else take this one. What are you supposed to say?
Well, let's say with the psalm. I mean, the first thing is like this. I mean, I guess if you got some of the English translations, and they end up reading the same. But I'm not sure everything has to be explained. Um, but it's it's really about the crying. I mean, the main theme is the crying that we had on the way into exile. Into exile. So check one thing. Hmm. I'll have to come back to you with a palpable response to that one. All right. Um, okay. Number 6. Shnaim sheishim al shulchan. Now, if you've got two people eating at the table at the same time, even if each one has their own plate, I mean, or if they're eating fruit and each one has their own portion. Nevertheless, the the gadol, so the literally the greatest. Let's see, we're talking about someone who's the more learned. They should take first. As a gargan, someone who takes before the more learned person is considered glutton. Again, today I know it's not necessarily uh, the case. Because today most people when they eat, there's not a formal structure to the meal. Now you have someone makes hamotzi and they eat, but it's not normally like there's a whole uh, there's a whole etiquette. So you have to look around and see, oh, someone might be no more Torah than me. Maybe they're going to take first. And just wait for the person making a motzi, and then that's okay. Zayin, number 7. Sorry, 8. Now, a person can use bread for his needs. When does this apply? That's if the bread doesn't become repulsive. So, let's give some examples we're talking about now. Hilkach, therefore, ein seimchem boy es a kaira im ulei davishim yipol alapasia mois.
Did you do
You shouldn't
7?
use it. Oh, you're right. 7. Skip. Sorry. Shaim she'oichel metoich kaira achas. You have 2 people eating from one dish. Right, there's a serving. There's a packet of chips. Let's say. V'hifsik echad melechol k'dei lishtois or lasois eis davakon. One of them stops, not stopping permanently, but stopping just for a short, either to have a sip of a drink or to do something, something like that. So, derech eretz, manners is, the second one should wait for him. Right? You don't quickly, we got the bowl of popcorn, and one guy went to open the door, so I'm going to quickly eat as much popcorn as I can till, before he gets back. Manners is to stop and wait until the other person comes back because you're sharing the popcorn. It's not nice. Right? That's if there's 2 people. But if there's 3 people or more, 2 don't have to stop for 1. So when it's only 1 person who stopped to do something, the rest of the group doesn't have to stop. I've been thinking while we're talking about your question. So I guess I hope I don't look too preoccupied while I've been trying to do 2 things at once, say this and think about that. Because the issue is it's a revenge thing, right? So revenge in today's, so the way it works today, especially when there's Jews involved, is the enemy of the Jews, God forbid, can do whatever they like. But if a Jew dares do anything back to defend themselves, God forbid, right? Because there's many again, I don't want to be too but there's all these people who they'll be the first ones to lay a wreath at a Holocaust Memorial Day, and they'll cry because they really have a genuine feeling towards dead Jews. But live Jews, God forbid, and even worse, a live Jew who dares to defend himself, that's the worst thing. So what happens was in Bavel, that's what they did. In Bavel, when they conquered, they had a sport. They would take 2 babies, right? And they would the Babylonians, right? When they defeated enemies. So during a war, all types of atrocities happen. Now, I'm not saying they should happen. Some things, obviously, a certain amount of death in a war is unavoidable. That's what a war is. But it's not always the barest minimum that happens in war. However, when the war's over, generally speaking, normal armies don't commit atrocities. That's when you're talking about, sick or psycho people. So the Babylonians had a sport that would take 2 babies, hold one in each hand by the feet, and they would try and swing them together and see if they could smash both skulls in one shot. Okay, and it's I don't know if they had 2 sports or there's a different of opinion whether it was by banging the skulls together or to bang them both on a rock at the same time. Right, so that's what the Babylonians did. So when we talk about that verse, it's really talking about revenge, etc. It's really And it's figuratively speaking, because the Jewish people, our way is not then to take the babies of the enemies and the kind of, but it's really it's talking about essentially taking revenge for what they've done to us. It's really what it's talking about.
Difference between revenge and vengeance. Vengeance sounds like it's justified, and revenge sounds like it's not justified.
Right, vengeance, maybe whatever the and it's also not us saying it, right? So if you look at the posuk before that, just to translate, so it says Bavel, who's you're destined to be to be wiped out, to become a wasteland. So happy is the one who repay you in retribution for what you inflicted on us. Then comes that verse that you asked about. Happy is the one who will grab and crush your infants against the rock. So again, it's not us saying that we're going to do it to them, but what happens essentially is what comes around goes around. And the fact that the Babylonians, they did this, eventually they're going to be defeated by people that they've done this to in the past, and they're going to do it back. And really, I wouldn't even say it's a prayer. It's just saying, that's your destiny. You think that it would be, I mean, it's quite graphic, but it's on the lines. You have this bully, and he's always beating people up, and you can tell him, one day there's going to be a guy who's even bigger than you, and he's going to beat you instead. It's I mean, it could be you are wishing it on him, but at a certain point, you're telling the person, this is the consequences of your actions. That's how it goes. Anyway, that's that possible. That's the last part. I mean, really, the most important part is that we shouldn't forget Yerushalayim. We should always remember that we're in exile. What we've mentioned here is the most common custom, right? Including Chabad, that say Al Nahar Bavel all throughout the year, and on Shabbos, Yom Tov, Rosh Chodesh, other special days, Shir Malis. There are some Jews who actually say Shir Malis every day of the year. They say Al Nahar Bavel the 3 weeks. I think it's just the 3 weeks. But really in the lead up to Tisha B'av. But it's that concept of on Shabbos we're not thinking about exile. Shabbos we're celebrating, but during the week we shouldn't forget where we are, who we are, and there's going to be some those who afflicted us. It's going to come. It's interesting. We had it again a few weeks ago on the Pasha, Bris Bein and Besarim, the covenant that Hashem made with Avram. And one of the things that Hashem tells Avram, is that your children, your descendants, are going to they become slaves in a nation that's not their nation, right? Which is reference to Egypt. But the nation that enslaves is going to be judged as well. So it comes the obvious question: if Hashem is the one who sent them to slavery, and as a matter of fact, Avram agreed to it, why should the people who enslaved be held accountable? What did they do wrong? They just carry out the divine plan, right? So what they're judged on was that the slavery and the slavery, right? You can have someone who, okay, so you're the slave, they make you work. It doesn't mean they give you vacations and a holiday bonus. You worked very hard, but it's fair, And then, but Egypt, the slavery wasn't a fair slavery. Slavery was with death camps. That was really their point. They wanted to work people to death. It was to destroy the Jewish people. That's what they were judged on. If they just would have had the Jews as slave, and the Jewish people worked, and all the efforts went to the country's economy, and Egypt became, a boom country. And especially if then when Hashem said, "Let my people go," they said, "Okay," they might still be the greatest nation today. It's that's the issue, was with the cruelty of how they did it. And that was the thing with Babel. Babel destroyed. That was the Hashem's decree. But the cruelty. Okay. So back to number 8. So you can use bread for other things. In general, we can't take food, and we can't waste food, and we can't use food and we can't ruin it. So let's say you needed bread for a different purpose. Let's say, for example, so you wanted to let's say you're making kiddush, and you want to put your sid on top of the bread. It's got a challah cloth on it, but you put the sid on top, and so it's like a stender. It's like a little tabletop lectern for you. Makes it a little bit higher, and that way you make kiddush. So you use the bread. You're allowed to do that. Yes, we have to show respect to food. It's respect mean that we appreciate that Hashem has given us this food. We shouldn't take it for granted. But that you're allowed to do. But when can you use bread? Something that's not going to make the bread repulsive. So avol mid'lemaisba, but something's going to make the bread repulsive. Lo, you can't. Hilkach therefore. In tzeichen by kaira im humalaya davash in yipol apasu yimois. You can't use the bread to support, prop up a plate or bowl or something that's full, and it's the type of thing that if it spills on the bread, it's going to make the bread repulsive. The person won't want to eat it anymore. Right? So you can't use the bread. Most people don't want their bread with the orange juice all over it, coated orange juice. So you don't use the prop up, to support the orange juice cup if it's going to spill. And when you eat whatever food with bread, but pasi b'mokim kaf, and you're using the bread in place of a spoon, then tzarich lazar shel echol pam acha b'chol pam katsas min pas. So now you have to be careful. So let's say you have some dip on your plate. So you put some dip on your plate. We're not talking about double dipping the serving plate. We already said you can't do that. But you put some dip on your own plate, and you dunk the challah in. So you can't just eat the dip off the bread. You also have to take a bite of the bread with it. Shalom in a pas, gam ken yachol oisa. And even what's left from the bread should also be eaten afterwards. Right? Because it's not respectful to the bread just to use it as a spoon. Okay. Test number 9. Also, lizrik pasafil makim shein nimos. Now you can't throw bread. Right, we said this before, when you're handing out the bread to other people at the table, you can't throw it to them. But not only that, now we're talking about you can't throw it even when it's not going to become repulsive. So we're not talking about throwing it to the garbage. Something you can't even throw it anywhere. Why? Because the throwing of bread is insulting. But other types of food, then it depends. If they will become disgusting through throwing, so you throw a peach, and when it lands, it gets all bruised and smushed, then you're not allowed to throw it. But if it's not going to make them repulsive, you throw walnuts down the table to people, it's not going to make any difference. The mutter you're allowed. So bread, which is considered the staple food, we have to have extra respect for. We have to respect for our food because that
Rabbi,
shows. Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. The Sfaradim, many Syrian customs, they do throw the bread. They throw the bread when to each person.
Yeah, but I think it's a gentle lob. I don't think you start, like baseball pitching it.
because I attended one Shabbat with a Syrian family on the
Yeah.
beach actually, and and that was their custom. They take the challah and they tear it and they pass it on to they throw it at the person. It's at their guests.
Do they throw it to the Rav? I think that's if they throw
I'm
it at
sorry.
they throw it at the Rav, then but they may throw it at everybody else.
Well, David, the Rav was at the table. He's the one that was doing.
At some congregations they throw all
I
kinds of
don't.
things at the Rav.
Is
So,
he
No,
going
no,
to
no.
sit?
This was not. This is not. I'm
I
being
know.
very.
I'm
My
not
wife
kidding.
is. My wife is
Yeah.
here. She'll tell you the same thing.
Yeah.
We attended. This is what happened.
Yeah. So
That-
it obviously has a source somewhere because you are correct. It's not like just something that people do. It's the minhag of a segment, ancient minhag of a segment of Jewish people. So it has a source. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not expert in Sephardic customs. But
it's just for hamotzi. I mean, it's for hamotzi. It's not for
I understand.
just
Yeah.
for
So
the
for
meal,
that,
you know.
right. But other times it wouldn't. But in general, we need
No.
to show right. So in general, we should have to show respect. Okay. Just actually, just
My wife.
looking up while we're speaking. Just
Rabbi, it occurs
yes.
to me that maybe this is in order not to overly handle the bread that's given to each person for hamotzi.
Well, it's like in general. We even Ashkenazim, we don't pass the bread to people directly. So you put it on the table or you put it on a plate. So I think it's probably got something to do with that.
Yeah. They
Is
just want to
not
make
to
sure that everybody gets a piece, but
yeah.
without overhandling.
Okay, so got a sefer here. So it says that at a mourner's meal, when it comes to a mourner, the bread is placed directly into the person's hand. Right, so that's why in general we put the challah on a table or a plate, and that's why apparently that's why they throw it on Shabbos, only on Shabbos.
Thank you.
Okay, and there's another reason. There's another reason why some throw it, and this is because the table. As mentioned earlier, a table is like a mizbeach. It's like the altar. So when according to one opinion, there was a gap between the ramp up to the altar and the altar. So the people who brought certain offerings, when they carried it up, from there they threw it onto the to the fire. So it's because of that as well. That is that's what it says here. Seeing if there's anything else. Yeah. He brings. Some say it's because this custom originated in places where people they had their own small tables. Countries, people sat, they didn't sit a big table like they did in Europe. They had each person had their own small table in front of them. So it wasn't practical to put on the table. Okay. Anyway. But if that's how someone has a custom to distribute the bread at the meal, that's one thing. But in general, we don't throw food. Food should be treated with respect. Similarly, lo yeshiv al sak sheyesh bo peiros. You shouldn't sit on a sack that contains fruit. Shimsam they kach, because that will cause them to become not nice, or bruised and repulsive. You shouldn't wash your hands with wine or other foods, liquid foods. Because it degrades them. It's a disgrace. It's not what they're meant to be used for. And if you see an item of food on the ground, so you are required to pick it up. Likewise, food that's fitting for a human shouldn't be fed to animals, because also degrades the food. Obviously, if you don't have any other food, it's no problems. And leftovers, different things is not what we're talking about. But food that should be for people, yes, David.
What if a person is trying to wash for bread, but they don't have any water, but they have non-kosher wine?
Well, wine you can't use anyway to wash your bread. But let's say you wanted to wash his hands. But I know you probably just in general just wash your hands to be clean. But you'll probably have to wash them again anyway, because then you got non-kosher wine. Yeah. Not that we eat with our fingers, but we all, you always, yeah. If it's not kosher, I guess it's not considered food. Although that you give to the animals, see how they go after a few bottles of wine. The sheep will put on a good show. That's Yud. So, although we said we can't do anything that ruins the food and makes it repulsive, if you need to make a medicine from bread or some other food, so even though it's going to become repulsive, you need to breed penicillin on your moldy bread or whatever you do to it, then it's permissible. Yud Aleph, number 11. You have to be very careful not to throw crumbs away. The kasha lanius, because this causes poverty. The rather you should gather them and feed them to the birds. Again, there's a crumb and a crumb. You don't have to walk around trying to find, with a magnifying glass, trying to find the minutest means. But we just shouldn't throw away. Again, it's this matter of appreciation for what Hashem has given us. Yaakov went back across the river to get one small jug, one small earthenware container. Why? Because he felt everything he owns is a gift from Hashem. So he didn't look at it as an earthenware container. He looked at it as a gift from God. And that's what motivated him to go back on alone across the river to get it. Most people wouldn't bother. Yud Beis. Hashoisa Mayim. When a person drinks water, you shouldn't drink it in front of others. You should turn your face. But other drinks, you don't need to. And again, today, I don't think people really do that today. But this was this is social norms. In other words, a person has to have manners. Manners means what's the social norm of the time and place, right? So so people used to do. Yud Gimel. Ein mistachlin mifnei ha'oichel v'shoisei. You shouldn't stare at people who are eating and drinking. V'lo mechalko shafonov. You also shouldn't stare at his portion in front of him. Kedei shlo b'aishay. Because we don't want to embarrass people. It's going to embarrass people. Yud Daled, 14. Kol macha mashke shemavim lefnei adam sheish lo royach v'adam tov lo. Any food, or when food is brought out and it has a good smell, and it's something that people will want because of the smell, it gets people excited, then you have to give a little piece to the waiter first. It's not fair, right? That the waiter is running around serving everyone, and it smells delicious, and his appetite's being aroused, and he gets nothing. Because it can be damaging to a person, it can be harmful to a person to have all this good food in front of him that person wants, and you can't eat any of it. Okay. 15. You shouldn't give food to someone unless you know they're going to wash their hands if it's bread, and they're going to make a blessing, etc. Right? We shouldn't, we have a prohibition of not putting a stumbling block in front of a blind person. Now, although it means literally also, don't put things in front of a blind person, make them trip, but it also means we shouldn't do things that are going to encourage someone. You don't put a suitcase with $1 million in front of someone on Shabbos, because some people won't be able to control themselves, and they're going to take it. Right? You shouldn't do things that are going to encourage other people, lead other people to do the wrong thing. So if you know a person not going to make a bracha on the food, they're not going to, you shouldn't give it to them. Again, obviously there's a time and a place. It could be better than eating non-kosher food, and maybe you can get them to make a bracha, but you should try. Okay. Tes Zayin. Isha she'ein baila ima. A woman whose husband is not there. Ein lo lishlesh yain. She shouldn't drink wine. And if she's away from home, afilo in baila ima, if her husband is with her, asura lishlesh shouldn't drink wine. But them shamashkim, hamashakrim, and the same applies to other intoxicating drinks. Now, if she's used to drinking wine in the presence of her husband, then and she can also have some not in front of her husband. Right? And essentially what we're saying is that unfortunately there are people who take advantage of intoxicated women. It's not a modern day thing. It's something that unfortunately has gone on for a long time. So people who are used to having some wine, it's they can handle it. But a person, we don't blame the victim, God forbid, but we try and set up a situation where people want them set themselves up to become victims. This is like type of advice of don't go jogging in the park at 12 o'clock at night. Okay, it doesn't mean they deserve to be mugged or, God forbid, worse. But a person shouldn't set themselves up for it. Let's squeeze in one more, something to finish on a little more positive note than that. 17. You shouldn't take food that's served to them and then give it to the children of the host. Because maybe the host doesn't have anything else. So let him die, and then they're going to be embarrassed that they won't have any more to serve. But if there's lots of food on the table, Shem should bless your soul. We should have plenty of food to be served on the table. The mutter, then you're allowed. Okay. Any questions before we finish up? All right. So looks like we ran out of time. Those who joined the morning Talmud Shiur, so we'll get to see you again tomorrow morning. Rabbi Smith's on transit back home, and after being uplifted at the Kinnis Shulchan. And otherwise, we'll see everyone else next week, God willing.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Uh,
Have a good day.
Have a
everybody.
wonderful week. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.